I'm John Sleeting, your host, and today I'm joined by Gary Shunk.
We're in the midst of the greatest wealth transfer ever in history. It's in the trillions. I've heard 80 to 120 trillion dollars over the next 10, 15 years.
Real big numbers, yeah.
It's huge. When we're clashing in differences, we take positions. And when we take positions, we've stepped out. So what I do in the work is go, let's create a win-win. If we're making a decision together, we have a different, if we're taking positions.
Hello, and welcome to Clear Conversations, the Entrepreneurial Legacies series. I'm John Sleeting, your host, and today I'm joined by Gary Shunk. Gary is the founder and CEO of Aligned Family, and he's got a fantastic career, and we're going to focus and explore the psychology of wealth. We're going to talk through his career from psychotherapy to working with families of wealth and how they can be better together as individuals and as family units in the love for one another, to bring harmony, to bring flourishing, and to make an impact in the world. Listeners have heard often the word impact when it comes to the concept of legacy. And I'm pretty confident you're going to hear that as part of this conversation again today. How do we do that as individuals as we think about our own legacies? But how do we do that as family units to come together, to love one another, and together have an impact that could be even greater than us individually? Gary has got just fantastic practitioner experience working alongside families in depth, working towards dialogue at the individual level, as well as running and facilitating family meetings that include many, many, many participants across the family to bring them together to make a difference in the world. So thank you for listening. You're going to enjoy this conversation. And so, Gary, thank you for taking time out, coming in the studio, and having this ongoing conversation where we're focused on this topic of family governance. As listeners have heard from Kirby Rossblock, from Amy Castoro of the Williams Group, you coming in now for this third part in the series is really meaningful, especially with your organization, Aligned Family, and are talking about family governance and alignment. What does that even mean? But before we get into what that all looks like, let's focus on Entrepreneurial Legacies, right? The series that is our overarching theme. And this word legacy, you and I were speaking about it. How do you define legacy for yourself, for your work, for your family, for the families you serve? How do you think about this concept coming into this this show, this podcast overall of Entrepreneurial Legacies?
John, that word, as I mentioned earlier, that word legacy has had so many iterations in my life. When I first heard it, maybe when I was a teenager, what does it mean to me? But it's evolved. My understanding of it has evolved over the years. And I think I'll just talk about my own, is that who my parents, my family of origin, and what I inherited from them around values and a sense of integrity and gratitude and curiosity about life. That's and my father's legacy to me in particular. When he was passing, I didn't think I'd say this, but when he was a few days from passing on. This is 2001. My wife at the time put our youngest daughter, who was 7 weeks old, in his arms, and he held her, and he had been very, very quiet, started to weep a little bit, and he handed Hannah back to her mother, and he said quietly, God is love, isn't he? You don't need much. And I thought, that's my legacy from my dad. You don't need much. There's so much. And so that's what I inherited. And with regard to the families I serve and what I do in Aligned Family is I listen for those anecdotes or stories that have informed the wealth creators, business owners, and from their past or in the midst of their lives today, what are they doing that is perpetuating a sense of values, because families, as I like to say, families are love-based social systems. And so what I do, and what families want is we want to elevate the love. So how do we do that? We do that by listening, caring, and again, curiosity about what really matters most to these families.
Well, wow, I'm just reflecting still on your father's words, and we don't need much, which in an organization like Clearwater Capital, and we talk a lot about wealth management and how wealth gets preserved and created and grown and all those aspects, to still step back and be like, you don't need much, right? I mean, and what love within a family. So go back to that again. What a family, as you defined it, is
it's a love-based social system. Right. So there's social systems, like Clearwater Capital Partners is a social system. It's a organization of people. Well, families are social systems too. I like to think of them as micro societies. And so in the work I do, and the work you do as well, is that what we do is we want to help these families that have these complexities with the wealth or business or combination of those things. My word, align. So if a family can align, and what that equals is really have the deep conversations around what it is that matters most, and what matters most to them are the family members, and the good fortune and the efforts that they put into growing their businesses, their wealth, and so on. How can we help them align in their dialogues and conversations and decision makings to create a shared future that they want? And they educate us about that so that we can be of service to them to get there.
So defining this word aligned. Forget the Webster dictionary, right? Let's go to the Gary Shunk dictionary. How do you define what aligned is? How do you know it when you see it?
A lot of families have, I'll say conflict or differences, and they clash. And what that equals is that they have different opinions about things. And so what I do, when I'm working with a family, is I go, where are the parts where they are aligned? Where do they agree? Where do they agree? Where do they make decisions that end up taking them forward? And again, going back to this love, is that they love each other, but they also have complexity of the wealth and the business components. So for me, to find alignment is to focus on the things that they all care about individually and collectively. And they'll, through their stories, through their decision making that they've shared with us from the past and where they are today and where they want to go, that shared future they want to create together, they'll educate us about what's missing, what works, what doesn't. And so dialogue and conversation, I think my core deliverables, I like to say, is family dialogue, family conversations, family meetings. So in family meetings, when you're in there as well as I, what we're doing is we're looking for alignment. Where do they agree? Where are they united? And where are they headed? So I have this equation. So alignment leads to harmony. Harmony leads to flourishing. And if the family's aligned and they're harmonious, then they'll flourish. What that equals is they'll raise the individual members of the family through their care and investment and all the things that they value.
Right.
And then as they individually flourish, the family is rising collectively together as well. I think I said this to you. I'll just add this little piece that philosophically behind what it is that I do is I see these micro-societies, these families, these social systems with means and influence, and they make jobs and businesses and so forth. They impact the greater culture, society. So when they are aligned, harmonious and flourishing, they're impacting everybody in their communities as well as expanding out into greater culture.
So we got deep really quickly. So I'm going to hit the brakes here, back up a little bit, so that listeners get to know who is Gary. Where did you grow up? You already shared a little bit about your father, but like where'd you grow up? Your family you grew up in, the work after school. Where did you find yourself, and how did you find yourself to where you're at today?
Sure. So I'm a fifth generation member of a business owning family that was sold when I was in elementary school. So according to my paternal uncle, Ralph, he said that my great-great-grandfather came from Switzerland and started a dairy farm in Toledo, Ohio.
Okay.
Subsequently, my great-grandfather succeeded him. Then my grandfather married into the family and succeeded those gentlemen. And then my father succeeded my grandfather.
Okay.
And that business, 18-something or other, I don't even know,
Okay.
but they basically, they wound it down and they sold it. And my entire life, my cousins and I continued to talk about that. There was a dairy that farmers would bring milk and they would process it. My dad was a dairy technology graduate from Ohio State, and this is going way back, but there's legacy there too. Yeah. So interestingly, down the road, as I got older, I was interested in family psychology and marriage, how marriages work and how they work well, and what are the difficulties, and just relationship.
Okay.
So I went to undergrad and graduate school and studied behavioral science, psychology, social work.
Okay.
And found myself headed into practicing psychotherapy, which I did for 20 plus years. And along the way, while I was doing that work, John, I had clients coming to see me for the reason I was networked. I had a good network. And these were wealth-owning family members, individuals, as well as business owning, multi-gen. And I'm going, wow, I have a background in history. So I had a great affinity for what it was that they were talking about. Yeah. And all of the issues were relational, that's my thing, communication, relationship. And so that evolved.
So before we move off of that then, so 20 years psychotherapy.
Right.
And there is, from a very pedestrian view, and so I'm a good test bed in this. If you ask me to define psychotherapy versus other areas, psychiatry, psychology, general counseling, how do you look at that space overall, and how would you explain that to listeners regarding, what's psychotherapy versus maybe other areas?
Sure. Psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, master's degree level counselors all practice psychotherapy. Psychiatrists tend to be more focused on medication. So for me, psychotherapy, and what I ended up doing, John, was individuals and couples primarily, but also families. And say an individual would come in and they were facing something in their lives that was very difficult. Usually you go to a psychotherapist because you're in some kind of psychic pain, losses, conflicts in a relationship, depression, anxiety, those types of things. And I worked with individual clients and also, as I mentioned, couples and families around these relational issues. Mm-hmm. And so, going back to the individual, it's like, how are you in relationship with yourself? Mm-hmm. And what are your symptoms telling you that you need to care for? And so we would do deep dives. I worked with some people for a few months, and I worked with some people for multiple of years to do a deep dive into their lives to kind of find out. What psychotherapy focuses on the past, your family of origin, where you came from and so forth, and where you are today. And so how can you reconcile with your past and make a better today?
And if I heard you correctly, in relationship with yourself, right? And most people think about, if I'm in relationship, there's another party that's out there. What does it mean to be in relationship with yourself?
So most of us are what I would call on unconscious autopilot. We're just cruising through our lives, and we're doing the best we can. And we have blind spots. We have things that we inherited, from our families of origin that may or may not be helpful to us. Carl Jung was a significant influence in my life, as was James Hillman. These are two psychoanalysts. And Jung would say that if we don't do our legitimate suffering, then what we have is neurosis. So let me unpack what that means. Ultimately, what that
you're looking at my eyes, going, "Yeah." I'm going to lose him here quickly here.
Yeah.
No, but this is fascinating. So keep going, please.
Sure. So legitimate suffering is when we go through something in life that's difficult and painful. It's difficult. It hurts. It's we call it suffering, and I believe the Latin root of the word suffering is to undergo. So we're undergoing something. And when we're undergoing something, it's not easy. And the best thing that we can do when we're undergoing something is we have to go to our roots of what it is that we have faith in and the people that we love. And what some people do is they come to a psychotherapist, they see a psychiatrist for medication if it's depression or anxiety. And what psychotherapy does is I like to use this term, I'm partnering with the client as they go through this dark night of the soul or period of change, as they're adjusting to be who they're, because we're always becoming. So they're in a place where they are now and they're becoming something. It's like, how can we get you into a new place?
And so being in relationship with yourself and taking that history with you, right? What's the saying, right? Wherever you go, there you are.
Right.
So if you're bringing that history with you, how do you? Because there's good relationships and there's not good relationships.
Right.
So I'm guessing now you step back and say, am I in a good relationship with myself or a not good relationship with myself? Right. How do I even assess and distinguish? Am I in a healthy place? Because I'm a firm believer you can't give what you don't possess.
Right.
So giving of love in that social construct and that loving social construct, it's really hard to give into that if you don't have that and don't have that for yourself and with yourself. How do you even assess if you're in a healthy relationship with yourself or maybe perhaps a denied unhealthy place with yourself?
You can't change what you don't name. And so when a client would come to a psychotherapy session, they're coming in and they're telling a story about where they are in life and how they're unhappy or anxious or worried or conflicted. And in that story is there are answers that the individual may not understand. And so what a psychotherapist will do is help them unwind and open up. And it's almost like you step back and you look at yourself with regard to that notion of how am I in relationship with what it is that's going inside of me, feeling-wise, thought-wise, behavior-wise. And the idea that a lot of people end up coming sometimes because they feel like they can't change their circumstances. And so to go to a therapist, to use that therapist as a helper, as a partner, to get through things, is quite common now. Yeah.
You say it's quite common now. How do you think the world's evolved regarding and I'm probably misapplying the terminology, but from mental health awareness very broadly in the most generalist, probably overly simplistic sense in a post-COVID world. I think people's awareness is significantly higher regarding the needs that are out there. But how has that evolved? And did there used to be stigmas when you first started, practicing professionally? And where does that stand today? And how should others even view this overall construct of people seeking help in order to get a better relationship with themselves?
I think there are still stigmas because sometimes people feel that if I can't figure it out and do it on my own, I'm weak. When in fact, if you are willing to go see a therapist, counselor, it's courageous of you to go do that because it's self-care. So mental health and the more, going back to the pandemic, I really believe that the pandemic, because of what was going on and the anxiety in our culture at that time, the fear that was in the air, literally, is that people, isolated and they were alone and they wanted help and they only, so they would go online and they would find therapists that did work online. And so I think it really took it up. Now I have colleagues of mine, friends of mine that continue their practices, and many of them are full and even have waiting lists. And I believe that it was the pandemic that kind of really moved psychotherapy and the notion of mental health as an important part of who we are and what we need to care for.
Right.
We go to the doctor for our health, our physical health, but we can also go to somebody for our mental health as well.
And you said you were practicing for 20 years in that space, and then where did your career take a turn?
So what ended up happening is that I felt the clients that were coming to see me, they were, as I had mentioned earlier, business owning, wealth owning. And I thought, what, I really have, I had a 20-year run. It was great. And I felt like, it's time to do something new or different. And so I had the good fortune of, there are people that James Hughes, J. Hughes, and Jim Grubman. I started to connect with them in the late 90s, early 2000s around this idea of wealth psychology, is what we were calling it back then. And of course, people go, well, what do you do, make people rich? And I said, no. But I had these clients that were wealthy, and the wealth in their lives was significant. And I had this sense of connectedness with how does that impact who you are and how you are. And so those folks that I mentioned, we actually had a wealth counselors network, and we would get together, on a phone call actually back then, and just talk about cases and talk about how we approached them and the issues that these clients had and how we could be helpful to them.
Yeah.
And subsequently, Jay, he wrote that book on family wealth and other books from the late 90s.
Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of Strangers in Paradise from James Grubman. And so you build in the network, finding yourself, continuing to focus, right, and still applying what you'd done for 20 years within psychotherapy, but then now focusing it in. Now, one distinction I want to make for listeners, and you and I even talked about this, of business owning and wealth owning. And sometimes I, capture that as somebody that owns their operating company, and it's part of, big part of their balance sheet of what that means, what that looks like from intra-family succession planning or bringing in outside CEOs, but the family members can continue to have predominance in the ownership. That's what you mean by business owning, and where that plays a disproportionate size regarding the family's balance sheet, so to speak. Wealth owning being more of the financial family, where the operating company or real estate portfolio, but a lot of times it's an operating company, has sold, and that liquidity, that monetization event has now turned from what some people coin monopoly money in the business into the financial assets, the liquid portfolio, the alternatives investments portfolio. That's what you mean when you say a wealth owning family or a financial family. And those are differences, and so we're going to want to explore a little bit how that even plays out within the family. But before we get too far into those details, as your career progresses, and then we're going to rewind back into some of these specific topics. So you find yourself, you're working, you're networking, you're talking to a lot of individuals, and you're continuing to deepen your expertise in this aspect of wealth psychology. So where did that take you then on from a career point of view?
So another wonderful thing that kind of came my way is that I developed a relationship with some of the leadership at Loyola University, the Family Business Center, which is under the business school there. And so I was asked to join as I guess I would say an associate or adjunct there in 2007. Okay. And what I ended up doing while I was there is I was working with business owning families primarily. They're all members of the Loyola Family Business Center. And what I did is I was a next generation coach. I also co-designed, co-taught seminars for families of what I would call the now generation leaders and the next generation. So we we would work to build bridges between the generations. Not that those bridges weren't already there, but it was like, how could we help them refine their communication, their relatedness, and with the now generation leaders, how could they discern the next gen? What are the gifts? What are the things that are missing? What are the competencies that need to be developed? And how can we help them be more confident in themselves as they start to move into succession of their parents' and grandparents' companies? Yeah.
And a lot of the focus there is back into the business owning families.
Yes.
More so than the wealth owning, the financial families, because of that business succession and family member succession, if that's right.
It is. And what I would say too, John, is that many of these families, because they were multi-gen business owning, there would be great wealth in the family system as well. So it was a combination of wealth owning and business owning. Today we use the term enterprising families.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is, and this was true for the folks that I would work with then.
Yeah. And not that it goes away. And this is where, with individuals, when we talk about the balance sheet, when we talk about, estate tax planning and wealth transfer strategies, that whether it's liquid or it's illiquid, whether it's the business or a financial portfolio, it's still on your balance sheet, it's still assets, you still have to plan for it. Where some individuals, and it is surprising, right? And the level or lack of financial literacy in the country, when you step back, even with families with significant amounts of wealth, regarding how some of the systems and taxation works, some of the intergenerational play that comes into place, where I've had conversations with families with significant 8-9-figure balance sheets, and they're surprised when they understand the back of the envelope, potential estate tax bill that's coming their way, and it's all in the business, and yet, people hear the stories about the family that doesn't want to sell the farm to pay the taxes, and yet their farm happens to be a business, and they just don't understand that liability that comes into play. So the education that comes on the technical side of it, alongside the aspect of the human capital, unfortunately, more time is spent on the financial capital, and there's still gaps that are out there, right, let alone the human capital and the intellectual capital of how that wealth transitions to continue to serve the family. So that's where we'll keep coming back to this business versus financial family. So now if we fast forward through your career with Aligned Family, which is an organization that you've launched, share with listeners, okay, who is Aligned Family? What does it do? The focus of your organization now.
Sure. Let me go back a tad and say that, one of the things I did before Aligned Family is I was recruited into Wells Fargo's private bank in 2016-17, and I went in and co-created with the team their family dynamics practice. And prior to that, the year before, I went and I was trained in ontological coaching. So I had my psychology, and then I added ontological coaching, which I'll just say briefly because that's a whole big deal.
I'll ask for another definition here.
Ontological coaching deals. It's about how we are, our way of being, primarily focusing on language, soma or body, what's going on in our bodies, and also our moods. So it was a great combination for me to integrate ontological coaching with my psychotherapy history. So just to move to what happened with Wells is that I had been on my own, as a psychotherapist. I had my independent practice as a coach and consultant, and then at Loyola. And so when Wells came, I ended up going in and co-created this family dynamics practice, and I spent the past 8.5 years with them. And I was working with advisors and families, clients of Wells Fargo all over the U.S. And that ended up being, for me, a graduate program in collaborative work. And I met families I never would have met otherwise had I not had the privilege of being with Wells. And it was a great sojourn for me. When I left Wells, I thought, do I want another job or do I want to go and do my independent practice? And so the independent practice struck me as, you know what, I can do that. I enjoyed doing it in the past, and so I kind of relaunched that.
You're now independent and creating Aligned Family in order to work with independent families. Some of them might be served by Wells Fargo. Some of them might be served by a host of other firms, including Clearwater Capital, right? In terms of families that we see, you're open now. You're a free agent, so to speak, in terms of working with a wide range of families, and how you get introduced and connected to them. So the families that might be listening to say, okay, you know what, I might want to pick up the phone and call Gary or check out your website. What are they going to find there?
So the website, alignedfamily.com, I have three areas that I serve in. One is directly to families, enterprising, wealth owning, business families. Around the primary things are succession, leadership succession, next generation, rising generation coming into the leadership, and stewarding that. I use the term missing conversations that are waiting. Missing conversations are waiting to happen in all these families we get to serve. So what we get to do is ask the right questions to help them consider the things that matter to them that they may be up against as they plan for the future.
Yeah.
So direct families. Next is firms like yourself, family offices, where I can be a coach and a trainer around family dynamics and family systems, emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence, the elements that I use the term invisible. These things are invisible to advisors and their families, but they're the source within that is kind of moving the family in the direction that they want to go, hopefully. And so what we get to do is align with them to help them create alignment in their decision making, et cetera.
And so you'd mentioned it earlier. So as we go through, the harmony, the flourishing, family, to have societal impact in their approach, is where I want to spend maybe the balance of the time as we go through case studies. Leaving out the names and the personalities for protecting individuals, right? Because it does take vulnerability to enter into this work. Right? It takes humility to say I need help in various ways to have a good relationship with yourself, let alone with those around you. And sometimes families are the most difficult and hardest relationships to navigate because there's a whole lot that comes with that as well. And so as we go through different scenarios. We'll first take that family. Let's take that small family business, right? First generation created the family business, and now the younger families are coming up, teenage years, coming into their 20s. Expectations on them. Where does that go well, and where does that go sideways really quickly?
Right. So, I'll give you an example that we're in the midst of the greatest wealth transfer ever in history. It's in the trillions. I've heard 80 to 120 trillion dollars over the next 10, 15 years.
Real big numbers, yeah.
It's huge. And so boomers primarily are passing wealth to their children. They're millennials and Gen Z, Alpha. And so, again, I call this missing conversations. And so just to go back to what I do, it's succession and then wealth transfer conversations.
Yeah.
Those wealth transfer conversations are really where I'm useful if I can be in any context. But that's so big right now, and your firm's dealing with it.
So let's define that.
Yeah.
What is a wealth transfer conversation?
Sure. So when wealth is transferred from one generation to the next, i.e. it's inheritance, and families work with their trust and estate attorneys to create documents, plans that protect the wealth, and they have trustees to protect the beneficiaries and so forth. And so those are, and also what your firm does with the components around finance and planning. Those are technical. So I'm a non-technical, non-financial guy. That's my space. So it's the human, social, emotional. So with regard to wealth transfer, and a 50-year-old who I know who has young children, he and his wife, he's accrued $80 million in a short amount of time, probably 10 years. And he was mainly focused on building the wealth and doing the deals and engaged in his passion in the work. And all of a sudden, he had a meeting with his advisor, and here's the number. And they're like, oh my God, how do we deal with that? So that oh my God moment is an emotional moment. And it was daunting for this man and his wife. Yeah. And how is this going to impact our kids? Yeah. And of course, there are many, many stories about children brought up with wealth that get lost and have lots of different types of issues and problems, addiction and all kinds of other problems that could come up. Right. So that conversation led to this advisor introducing me to this family. And that's a lot of what I've done is advisors will hear something that is unsettling to the family and obviously the advisor, and they care for and they want to help this family, but it's out of their skill set. They're focused mostly on the technical things. So they'll bring me in, and then we'll collaborate together to serve the family in what I would call a holistic way. Yeah.
Okay. So, in that family, going back to the case study aspect of it, most of it was still in the business and the value of the business, or they had a monetization event and now it was liquid? Out of curiosity.
That family, it was a combo of it in the business, and also they had liquidity as well.
Okay.
Let me share with you, here's one that will illustrate I think really well of what happens. So I was working with a couple. An advisor introduced me to this couple, and he was a public CEO, retired, had a large parachute, golden parachute, 4 adult children, and they were all solid, educated kids, anywhere from, say, late 20s to early 20s. And they were raised in what I would call significant affluence. So when the advisor introduced me to the couple, I talked to them about what have you messaged to your kids about wealth? How is your behavior with your spending and your investing and so forth? How do you think they've seen that? And what have you guys conveyed individually, mom and dad individually, but what have you conveyed collectively, and how aligned are you as a couple in your messaging? And so that was the beginning of the work that I did with them. And they had some differences, but they were more united than conflicted around their differences. And so the work I did
as a couple. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so what I did, John, is I helped them through these missing conversations that we had with their advisor, talk about how they wanted, what does the money mean, and how do we want it to be impactful in the world, but also especially to our children, their children.
Yeah.
So that was the beginning of the work. And then I said, do you want to have a conversation with your kids? As I say, my core deliverables of family meeting.
Yeah.
And they said, we absolutely do. And I said, well, why don't you introduce me to them? And so they did. And I interviewed each of the children individually, one-on-one. And I hold confidences when they share things with me. And they were very open. I said, why do you think your parents want to have this meeting? And they said, well, talk about money. And I'm like, well, what about money? So I learned from them how they experienced their parents and, how wealth and affluence has been a part of their lives, what they've struggled with and so forth. And then from that, those interviews that I did, I co-designed with them and their advisor a family meeting from those topics, which led to the questions they had. Okay. So it's like our meeting was really answering questions or exploring questions together as a family. And I could tell you more.
That there were their specific questions. So let's start with, and whether it be an individual, whether they're widowed, widower, divorced, that is the primary wealth holder, whether business or financial. Then when you bring a couple into it, back to that, you know, are you in a healthy relationship with yourself first? Now you bring in a spouse at that point, coming together and saying, now how do you make sure that they're on the same page?
Right.
In this case, you mentioned that they were. What does it mean to be on the same page? Back to that definition of alignment there. But what happens if they're not? And what are the big items that they need to be aligned on versus what are the smaller items to say that they're still individuals and they still have differences in the way that they might view things?
And that's marriage, isn't it? You know, we're going to have differences always. And so I actually, back when I was doing couples work, I would use the term that those issues in marriage were sandpaper on the hard edges of each other. So, you know, we rub each other the wrong way, but when we rub each other the wrong way, it makes us feel something, and if we don't talk about it, it goes underground and it becomes problematic, meaning, you know, we deny it or put it away and not talk about it. And that's problematic. So, you know, what I do is I go, how do you and this couple I was talking about and their 4 children, how do you guys rub each other the wrong way around money, decision-making, investing, and what you've said to the children? And so a lot of advisors won't ask those questions because they don't want to stir up emotions. And because I'm comfortable with that, and I do it in a diplomatic and honoring, respectful way, it's safe. So my end game is creating psychologically safe space so that anything can be discussed.
Well, and this is what I don't understand about this industry either, right? And you'd be way better having a conversation than I would on the subject. So I'll absolutely, you know, defer to you on that. But what I don't understand about this industry is advisors that are afraid of having more in-depth conversations that may be emotional, maybe spiritual in nature, maybe because in the end, that's what you're solving for, right? The money and the legal documents and the tax returns are for the life, not for the sake unto themselves. And this is why, you know, I often say this is where I think this industry has got it wrong. It's so caught up into those items that have to be done really well technically. But if it's void of the context of the human experience, it's a bunch. I mean, it just ends up being a bunch of nonsense and a bunch of paper at that time and moving numbers around. If it's having these missing conversations, so I think one of the missing conversations is the industry not engaging, and I'm not saying I got it perfected, but what we really strive to with our team at Clearwater is to make sure that we're going deeper into the conversations to get to the root of what people want to talk about, need to talk about, having those missing conversations. Otherwise, you can't talk about the proverbial, well, what's your goals and objectives? It's not just a bigger pile of money. It's going, no, I want to make sure that the kids are empowered in what they're doing and they're educated and we're enjoying time and we're loving one another. And that's what people's goals and objectives, you know, generally are. There's a few people out there that are probably skewed to just they want a bigger pile for, you know, for whatever reason. You know, and how many times can we quote people, you can't take it with you, and I mean, when you die, and the death rate's 100% and it's left behind anyway. So that if you can't tell, I'm getting on a little bit of a soapbox here. This is where I think the industry's got it wrong. There's a huge missing conversation there. And at the same time, I'm not saying that there's aspects of your professional career and experience in working with individuals directly that can't enhance even more these conversations with people. So this aspect and this need to say, okay, if we can evolve the world to being more open, coming out of, you know, unfortunately, the stigma of what it means for people that have mental health challenges, people that need to talk to a counselor, people that need that. I mean, can be so productive for individuals to engage in this discussion, and yet by not engaging in the discussion, it becomes an issue in that way. All right, so I'm done with my monologue here off my soapbox with things because it's such a big deal in the work that you're doing. So you bring that couple together.
Can I just comment on what you said?
Please.
So what was great is to watch you light up. Okay, and it's because of who you are, which is an anomaly as an advisor, and I think your firm is an anomaly. And what I mean by that is that you have a sensitivity to those things. And it's not, I want to say this, it's not that other advisors and other firms don't get it. But I've it's rare. I think it's rare. And in that it's rare, and in it you get it, and there's a passion about what it is that there's so many things that we could help them with in addition to the technical components.
Right.
And really what a trusted advisor is someone that really gets the family, gets the individual members on a deep, deep level, which is what, what I'm witnessing with you and your firm.
Yeah.
And I feel fortunate that I get to do what I do and collaborate with folks like yourself and advisors.
Well, thank you. I mean, it means that's what we strive for. There's an individual we're still in discussions with right now, so hopefully by the time this posts, whether we'll understand if they join the team or not. But the individual said something. It's like, you've become a real advisor when you get a call on a Saturday and it's not about money.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like now you're talking about life-type items and you're doing life together with the families that you're serving in that way. So as you bring a couple together and they're on the same page, or they have maybe rough sandpaper, right, depending if it's 30 grit or 300 grit sandpaper, how they're navigating, what conversations that are typically missing there within that relationship that need to be played out first before they engage and walk into the room where the rising gen, the next gen, is now being invited into the conversation.
Well, when I meet a couple or I'm working with a family, and there is a story behind the creation of the wealth. There's a story behind the creation of the business. And so what is that story? And in that story are the decisions that were made to move the family or the individual members forward. And those are driven by their values. And a lot of families, all of us for that matter, are not always aware of our values. So what I try to do is make what is implicit explicit in my interviews with them. And so with this one couple, it's like, what is it that matters most to them with regard to now that they have accrued this wealth? And the leader of the family, the patriarch in this case, he was passionate about management and overseeing the processes in the business that he was in, but he really cared about people, which good leaders do. I mean, that's core. And so that dialogue happened in that marriage as the advisor and I helped them talk about it. And then it's like, what do we talk to the kids about now about this and their own sense of what they're called to and what their passions are and so forth. And so subsequently, I was starting to say earlier, I interviewed all the kids, and then what we did, just to go forward, is we then had a family meeting based on the notions and the questions that we had. And during the course of that meeting, in fact, it was the day before, the patriarch came to me and he says, I'm going to give each kid $1 million. And I didn't say anything. And the next day he slept on it, he came over, he goes, that's way too much. And he says, one of the kids wants to buy a house. Well, we want to help them buy the house. So they decided $200,000 they would give to their son. And they said, what, we'll do this in the meeting. We'll give each of them $200,000. So what ended up happening during the meeting is we're talking about values and their philanthropy and so forth. And then Dad goes, Mom and I want to give you guys each $200,000. And so the first son said, great, I'm going to invest that in my home. The second child said, what I'm going to do is go back to grad school, and I'm also going to fix up my place with that money. The third was actually in our business. He says, I'm just going to invest that. And then the fourth child, who was in grad school, said, I don't want it. And the family reacted like, oh, come on, we're all doing this together. And she started to cry. And I said, she just said no. She said, I'm not ready. Let's honor her readiness. And so what that equals is there's an emotional thing going on in every money conversation, in every wealth transfer or succession. And so advisors, that I work with, they'll let me kind of run with what dynamically is going on because something big and deep is happening there.
Yeah.
And subsequently, what I ended up doing, I said, will you entertain this, the youngest child? I said, how about 25,000? And she said, no. And I got her down to 5. And she goes, okay. and what that equaled is that was the beginning of their wealth education.
Yeah.
So they were going to begin to work with their advisor around those technical things, budgeting, investing, credit, et cetera, and learn together and become his clients.
And then to her credit of having the maturity to recognize that she wasn't ready, what a gift, because if there's more wealth coming, or if the parents tragically passed in a car accident, and all of a sudden then they're going through the documents and being, now here's, much larger numbers and the responsibility that comes with that, how overwhelming. Even in that case, right, the parents decided that $1 million was too much, how do we bring it down to 200,000 to start the education process, right, to bring them along that way. And yet equal isn't the answer. You can love them equally in that scenario, right? You're loving the kids equally, but then treating them uniquely. And she needed to be treated uniquely and different than the other siblings in that scenario. And that's not good or bad. But when people look at it and say, well, we're just going to have everything be, in that case, 25% to everybody, and it goes, well, that's not necessarily the right answer, right? You have to approach the uniqueness of the individual that is the potential inheritor that's coming into the money, but having it, not avoiding the conversation, that missing conversation, but having that sooner on is so important in the education. Could you imagine if that was in the, as they show on TV, it happens in the attorney's office and everybody sits down and then gets the money doled out at that point in time? That would be overwhelming and crushing to the individual. Right. How does that start at a younger and younger age then? What is the age appropriate sort of dialogue that happens? In this case, you said roughly in their 20s.
20s, right. Well, children are witnessing us entirely, your children, my children witnessed us for their entire lives. And it's like, so in this case with this family and other families I've worked with, they've seen how they've been in relationship with that, from as young as they have memory. So I have just an anecdote that a colleague of mine who's from a very wealthy family remembered, and she was brought up, she had a chauffeur and so on, and but her dad came to her once and he had 3 dimes, and he says, put these in your hand. We're going to take one and we're going to go spend it. And she was 7 at the time. And the second one, we're going to put in your piggy bank. We're going to invest it, save it. And the last one, we're going to give away. We're going to share it with somebody. Spend, save, share, which a colleague of mine has actually written about, and I've integrated into the work I do too. So how do we want to be in relationship with what it is that we have? Yeah. And that can start at 7 with this child, and teenagers developmentally, I would say older teenagers, 17 on up, cognitively, they're more available for the technical components of it. I've got a story I could tell you about that too. But so it's a learning journey that families are on, and there's so many Generation 1, first-gen wealth creators in our country right now that are boomers primarily, but passing wealth that we've never been here before. Right. So how would you know how to do it? Right. And just to go back to the thought that you have about the uniqueness, is that every family is different, and the best practices seems to be, and what I've learned and witnessed too, is that don't wait until you're passed on to have the meeting with the attorney and opening the estate plan. Learn how in your family system to gift. Small gifts. I have another story about an uncle who has no heirs himself, direct heirs, but he had his cousin's children. And he asked them, he said, could I, he's hundreds of millions of dollars, could I give your kids some money? And of course, his cousins of his generation said, "Yeah." so then we invited those first gen, what is it called? First cousins once removed, I believe, into a meeting with their uncle, and asked them would they be interested in that, and they said yes. And so the uncle, wise, loving man as he was and is, he said, "Let me give you each, the minimum amount I can give, for my taxes, et cetera." I think it was $16,000. And there were seven of these nieces and nephews. Okay. And then he wanted to have another meeting 6 months later after he did that, and he wanted to find out, what did you do with that money? One didn't touch it. Several of them invested it in their homes, that they wanted to get a home someday, so a piggy bank for their home. And then one was in medical school, and he was using it for his medical school, et cetera. So what he wanted to do was go, I don't want this money to harm you. I want it to be a blessing to you.
Right.
So he did another tranche of gifts, had another meeting, because as he was aging with this great wealth that he created, he wanted to find out, would you guys like to participate in this at some point? And so that's not happened yet, but that was down the road.
Yeah, well, hopefully the gentleman's got a lot of good years in front of him and health and quality of life. But the educational process that comes into play, because you hit on the spend, save, and share. And this, the spend and save is for yourself. It's for your family. I mean, that's how you're enjoying life today, or saving it, investing it for the future. The sharing, the philanthropic piece, the only other place it goes is taxes, right? And so here's an individual that's like, how do you think about that transference within the family, extended family, and then the sharing component, as my dad likes to say, right? Charity starts at home first, right? How do we, how do you make sure you're taking care of family? And then how do you make that impact around the world? Back to your harmony and the flourishing and the social impact that takes place. What role do you think philanthropy plays within families that are in a healthy place with themselves, their family unit, the educational component, and then making that societal impact? How do you think about the broad-based topic of philanthropy?
I think philanthropy is it's many things. One of the things it is, just to think about this with you, John, that it is a learning area about, again, going back to, do we give because we want a tax break, or why are we giving? What's the intention behind that action? And so a family, one of the families I work with, they had three teenagers and mom and dad, and they had a lot of wealth, and they said, do you guys want to do some giving together, some sharing together of what it is that we do, what it is that we value? And so the homework for the kids, and mom and dad for that matter, was to go and to look at, what are the needs of the culture, society, world that matter to you individually, and do some research on that. And so they did, and we came back and we had a family meeting about what it is that the children, as well as mom and dad, and they found that there was one thing that they all agreed with, which was education. They valued their own education, they valued education across the board, but then the children were some were into animals, protecting species, environment, and other types of things like that. And essentially what they did is they then, the next meeting was, go out and find the organizations that you would like to gift to, and we'll all have $500 each to do that. We'll come back after we talk about these organizations we've given money to, and what did it feel like? What did we learn? And then the last meeting is like, we collectively as a family will do something together in our name. And there was $5,000, I think, is what they did. So this was the beginning of their philanthropic journey as a family.
Coming together as a family. Now, some listeners might be taking this in and being like, wow, this sounds a little bit like utopia, right? These families are not like our family. The families you're describing are little Leave It to Beaver, right? If I have a dated reference in here in terms of how it's being approached. Our family is just not like that, right? We have a food fight when we get together. Heck, even with our own family.
Right.
My one son-in-law describes dinner. He's like, the Sleeting family dinner experience. You can't describe it. You just have to experience it, because everyone brings their opinions and their thoughts and debates and conversation that takes place. Typically, when we get together, in a loving way, right? I mean, keeping it focused on that loving social construct that you mentioned. But some families may not be so loving, right? And it may be cutting. So individuals that are like, I hear what you're saying, and that sounds nice, but that would never work within my family. How do those families break through to get to a point? Maybe they actually want to be to. They can't see the path from here to there.
Pretty normal, and the whole idea, going back to my line again, alignment. So discovering where it is that they do agree, where they do have a sense of shared value, and then bringing their attention back to that, because they love each other, they're family, but they also may have significant differences politically, sociologically, et cetera. And I always like to say, it's like a diamond. It has many facets. The family is just, has, some families have radical differences inside of them. But what is it that unifies and we align around what it is that we care about? And us as advisors, serving families like this, we'll find that out if we're curious and we look into it, and they'll share it with us. In some ways, when I go into these missing conversations and I'm asking questions that they may not have thought about, what that does is open up. It gives them actual permission to talk about things that they may not have been able to talk about or been concerned about but never really voiced. And when they start to do that in a family meeting, what that does is, I've witnessed this over and over, is that another family member will have a riff on that. And they may have some clashing differences. But what I do then is go, how can we elevate the individual thoughts in the room? That they're not right or they're wrong, they're just different.
Right.
They're unique to who's speaking, and ultimately what the love part is that we honor the differences. And the Leave It to Beaver idea, the unified perfect television family, there's no such thing.
Right. It's non-existent.
And there are families that have deep differences, and so how do they deal with conflict? And all I do with conflicts, when they're clashing, all I do, and I may have said this earlier, John, but it's differences that haven't been thoroughly heard and walk through together. And so when we're clashing in differences is that we take positions, and when we take positions, we've stepped out, and then this is my position on this is yours, and we clash. So what I do in the work is go, let's create a win-win. If we're making a decision together, we have a different, if we're taking positions. Let's put your agenda to the side, say it's your brother. Let's put your agenda to the side about this and ask and really inquire into your brother about what it is that his position and his ideas, what are they really? And then because you put your agenda to the side, I think that's an act of love to do that. And when you're then doing a deep dive, listening into your brother and what it is that matters to him, and how you love your brother, but you may think he's a pain in the neck too. And that's typical. But it's like, hey, how do we bridge, especially when there's business or finance, involved in it. And we need to make a decision. And then vice versa, have you do that for your brother, et cetera.
When you look at families, this business operating family versus the financial family, the wealth family after selling the company, and our businesses are just less of a concentrated position for them. What's the major compare and contrast you see in terms of the dynamics within the families?
Well, the operating business it's an identity. It's here's our company. We even may have our name on it, and we organize around that entity, which creates for us the wealth and the lifestyle and our meaning in life. And so when there's a liquidity event, so that gets sold, and there's a liquidity event, we become a financial family. We own assets together. We don't have the same identity that we had before as a operating company. Now we are still in relationship around money. So that identity crisis in some ways is an opportunity to kind of go, okay, who are we? What is it? What matters most to us? And what does this money mean? And how do we want to be in relationship? I've even said to families, financial families, I go, that money is a member of your family. How do you want to be in relationship with it? You know, is it going to run you, or are you going to walk with it and be in relationship with it? And how can you as family members align around how we want to be in relationship with this? How do we want to invest it, spend it, share it, et cetera?
Yeah. God, my mind's going in so many different directions because you just use this, the term identity, right? And the identity being matched into the business, right? Or the identity being matched into the wealth itself versus the individual's personal identity that could get lost or masked by all those things, or there's a risk of that happening. How do you help people understand like what their individuality is, right, and what that identity is? And you've mentioned earlier the incorporation of the emotions that come into this, a spiritual lens that comes into this. Then you end up with the peer groups or friends, or I don't think social media has helped with people understanding what their identity is versus what they want to project into the world. How do individuals even go through that clear process of what their identity is versus what that relationship is back with the wealth itself?
It's a big question, and I don't know that there's a solid one answer, but it's a process.
Yeah.
And a process is over time. And I used that idea earlier about becoming. We're always becoming.
Yeah.
And so, say when a family sells a business and now they have liquidity, and who we knew ourselves to be back then, we're in, I'll use the word liminal. Liminal is we're betwixt and between. We've left an identity or a way of knowing who we are, and we're moving into another one. And the liminal is the space between that, which is a transition. And those are really good, vulnerable times, and times to be courageous and kind of look at, maybe I don't know what I need to know right now, and I need help. I need somebody like John's firm to help me. Maybe Gary and John, and we'll all work together and think together about it. So what we're doing is discovery in this new trajectory of who we're going to be, and then the values of who we were and who we are and who we're going to be refine.
Yeah.
We have a sense of refinement.
You mentioned earlier one of the key outputs of all the work that you do is bringing the family together, right? And I don't want to oversimplify it here, put words in your mouth, but it's having a family meeting, and that all of a sudden people are making up pictures in their mind of demystify for individuals what is a family meeting. If you were to put together an agenda for a family meeting, how do you even go about putting together the agenda? I think you mentioned a little bit talking to the couple, talking to the children. How do you put together an agenda? What should be the expected outcome from an agenda from a family meeting that's assembled? And it's not a one-off, right? I'll be the first one to say that meeting ends with the expectation there's a second meeting and a third meeting. But what is a family meeting?
Sure. And just on that last point, families that have ongoing meetings together over, twice a year, once a year, whatever, however big the family is, the research shows that those are the families that learn together and make then good decisions together. And that idea of shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. Right. So they get.
And for listeners that may not know that, can you real quickly with that?
G1 creates the wealth. G2 spends it because there is no prep or preparation for heirs, et cetera. And then G3 is back shirt sleeves working again to recreate it. So the families that have these ongoing meetings, and I'll describe how I do that, but the ones that have these meetings over time, there's a family in Italy, 14 generations, and they've been having meetings. They're vintners, and they've been having meetings for hundreds of years at this point. So they really have figured it out.
With a few good bottles of wine in the process too, right? That can help.
Yeah, and they've modeled. How
14
to do
generations.
Right.
So it can be done.
And in the U.S., it's 5, 6, and 7 generations in business owning, wealth owning families, for that matter. So what I do is I interview family members. Some advisors that I work with use assessment tools to kind of get a sense. Everybody takes a test, so to speak, or a survey, and that information is put together, and it gives a sense of how you think and so on. I tend to basically interview everybody one-on-one to get a sense of what are the questions or topics or concerns with regard to where they are in their life. If they're going to sell, or if they're going to if they've got a liquidity event coming up and they're just getting ready for that, how's that going to impact them? What are the things that are on their hearts and minds? And so these interviews that I do, one-on-one interviews, there's one family I'm working with 15 members, third and fourth generation, business and wealth. And so I'll interview each of those members. The youngest one is probably 20. The oldest is in their mid-60s, patriarch. And they want to have a family meeting, and they want to do this, for over 3 days. And so I'll interview them to get a sense of what are the topics, questions, and concerns. The patriarch had kind of said at the beginning, I really want us to just not fight. I don't want us to sell, and I want us to learn together. So all those interviews educated me about what the agenda would be. And again, I go back to this idea of I co-design.
Right.
So it's not Gary coming in and here's what we're going to do.
It's not Gary's agenda. It's the family.
It's never my agenda. And so what I do is their needs and questions are primary. So we capture that. Then I run it by them, and that's the co-design. And they'll say, fix this, change this, or it's great. And then we have that, and then we basically, convene, sometimes at a not, at a retreat home or something like that, or a resort rather. And we'll have these conversations. They'll have people come in from the company that they own and report, the presidents, the management people, investors, whomever come in and report on how things are going. But then mainly focusing on the family, when those people leave, about where we are, where we need to go. And then the whole idea is with regard to the rising gen members, in this case it's 20s and 30-somethings, which is typical. What are their future plans? Do they want to be involved if it's a business, do they want to be involved in the business? If it's just shared wealth, how do we do that philanthropically? What are your interests? What do you want to learn? Who do we need to connect you with to help you learn and become confident and competent? And then what happens is that meeting gets, that's like a couple days. There's fun too, go golfing or skiing or whatever they would like to do for fun. So you break it up. It's not all just head stuff.
Yeah. And you're facilitating this time.
Right.
And how important is that role of families are exploring this and they're thinking about it and they're listening, saying, we need to engage with that. This is something, you don't do at home, supposed to, so to speak, right? How important is that to have the family members all as participants and not trying to run it, facilitate it, or even put together their agenda where it comes across as the individual's agenda versus the collective's agenda?
You know what you're talking about, John. Because, the whole idea there is if you have an outside, non-family person like myself facilitating and helping them co-design it with their advisors, then what they get to do is just participate. There's no need to move it forward or whatever. They just get to show up as themselves. And so I, as facilitator, because of my background and so forth, I'm watching body language, I'm, nonverbals, and those types of things, as well as, what emotions are showing up. And, who's checked out, who's very much in, who may be dominating. And so I'll manage that dynamic, family dynamics. That's really what I do for a living. So the family dynamics show up in these meetings, and I'll watch for them and learn from a family, having worked with them maybe over years, what certain types of things mean, what certain statements mean, what certain body language means, and then I'll call it out in a respectful and honoring way to go, you've been very quiet during this last topic. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah.
And they'll be quiet for a moment. And when they're quiet, that means they've gone inside to reflect, and then they'll come out and they'll throw something out that could even be innovative to the conversation. So the whole idea is participate. You're invited.
Yeah.
Everybody is part of the family.
Yeah. We do need to wind this down in terms of the time here together, but this is why this is such an important subject, right? And the human capital, the preparing heirs, preparing future generations, the educating them through philanthropy as a tool to understand the businesses, to understand the management, the 3 dimes, example that you shared. It's just so important to be proactive and intentional about these matters, as much as it is, frankly, if not a bit more, than the preparing of the assets for the heirs, right? And all the legal, tax, financial. Again, it has to be handled really, really well. But those are just tools then to empower a family to have an impact in the world and make the world a better place. And we all know that it needs to be. Yeah. So thank you so much. I want two last items in my ask here. One, how do people get in contact with you if they want to reach out? And then just, the wrapping up of your final thoughts regarding this concept of the wealth, the psychology of wealth.
Mm-hmm. I have a website, alignedfamily.com, and you can reach me through that. And what was the last question?
Just the psychology of wealth. Like kind of final thought.
Well, the essence of what that really is the psychology is about the inner life of a person, but also a family, the interior life, the feelings, thoughts, and therefore behaviors. And so having an awareness of that as an advisor, but also as a family member, and then how wealth and money, what do we think and what do we feel about it? How do we behave with it? So wealth and psychology are really important to co-mingle together.
Yeah.
And so we as people in service to these families, we get to help them have those conversations.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having this conversation today. It's been fantastic. Love the subject. Look forward to serving families together with you as well. Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in again to this podcast. If you need help from us to get in contact with Gary, please reach out again through clearconversations@ccpwealth.com. Have a blessed day.